monitoring and documenting the process of history is our job as journalists.
They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. As a writer myself, it's an adage I find a little difficult to accept, but there's no denying that a photograph has the ability to capture a moment like no other medium. Which is why, despite the development of video technology, photojournalism is still considered one of the most impactful forms of journalism. Our globalist today knows very well the power of the photo, having won 2 Pulitzer Prizes for his coverage of the LA riots in 1992 and the 1998 coverage of the sex scandal surrounding then U.S. President Bill Clinton. Photojournalist Kang Hyung-won is here with us today to talk about the history he witnessed through his photo lens and why he is today obsessed about the Korean native dog. So Hyung-won, welcome to the Globalists.
Thank you for inviting me to be on your show.
Well, we are very glad to have you on board because, you know, your background as a photojournalist makes you a fascinating person. A photojournalist really has to be on the scene to take the photo. I mean, you can't take it from a wire, anything else. So you have been on the forefronts of many news events. And the number one that comes to mind because of the Pulitzer Prize is the 1992 Uprising, from what I hear, is being called in LA, in which Koreans over there really suffered. So tell us what it was like to be a photojournalist in LA at that time.
1992, April 29, which Koreans call it Saegu Uprising or Saegu Riots, was America's most destructive urban riots. And Koreans took the blunt of the damage of all of the suffering and loss of properties. And I was staff with the Los Angeles Times at the time, in charge of the South Bay edition of the LATimes. When I heard the news in the afternoon of a police evacuating from Florence and Normandy, where the flashpoint of the LA riots began, I headed right there and I started covering it nonstop until it was over. And then Koreatown was actually affected on the second day of the riots. It originally started in the South Central and then it spread to the Koreatown area because there were no police present.
Yeah. I mean, we see from the photo that it was on fire. You know, you can see the town being on fire.
The fury of African Americans about the not guilty or the acquitted verdict of the LA police officers just hit the roof and just everything started burning up starting the first night of the riots. Yeah.
So how did you feel when you were there, you know, taking photos of what was going on?
Well, as a photojournalist, our primary mission is to document whatever that's happening. So I did that and I try to do it safely with the help of my colleague Larry Davis, who helped drive the car when I needed a driver. And then when the LA riots spread to the Koreatown, I knew the area like back of my hand. So I went in and I covered what was going on without getting hurt, thankfully. And then of course there was bullets flying, lots of shooting. I heard gunshots all the time. And on the second night of the riots, a Korean-American young man named Eddie, Edward Jaesong Lee, Lee Jaesong, he was killed at a shootout. And once that picture was published and plastered all over American television and newspaper through Associated Press sending it out, Rodney King came out that afternoon at 5 o'clock and called a press conference and say that a man has died please stop. This is not what it is.
People, I just want to say, you know, can we all get along? Can we get along?
Can we just all get along? That's what he said. And then that night, the riot stopped. Yeah.
You talk about, you heading to Koreatown as soon as you heard where the flashpoint was, which was really centered around that area. Being a Korean, was that what sort of really got you on the road?
Well, as a photographer for the LA our primary mission was to document whatever happens in LA area. So it's just instinctive responsibility that drove me to do that. And then, of course, I'm the only fluent Korean speaker out of 1,100 editorial staff at LATimes.
Oh.
So
This
felt like
is 1992, where Koreans were still a bit of the population.
The newspaper should be multicultural, multinational, to be able to cover everything. But LATimes at the time was not doing that great of a job. But thankfully, I was in there from the inside, being able to at least supplement whatever the mainstream media was not able to do. Yeah.
So as a Korean, was your viewpoint different? What was the fact that you were a Korean by birth? How did that help you, give you a different vision of what was happening?
Well, as a photojournalist, what grabs your attention is what you understand. And I understand Korean culture and history. So being Korean American means I have additional knowledge sets to be able to see the world beyond ordinary, right? So people who don't know what they don't know anything about what to expect from what they don't know. So from my perspective, because I knew what Korean culture is, I know what Koreatown is, I'm able to see beyond just whatever superficially is happening. I was able to follow the volunteers who showed up, risking their lives to protect other Korean American shops in the community. So I was able to see things because I had more in-depth knowledge about my culture. That's why news media has to have national multicultural diversity to be able to cover the stories of humanity better. Yeah.
It's a very different story when you go to the East Coast, and the next Pulitzer you got, which was covering the Lewinsky-Clinton sex scandal in 1998.
Yeah.
So what was that like?
Well, I was the manager at the AP's largest bureau in the world in Washington, D.C., and we managed to cover the story not knowing which direction this story was going. So we had a team of good photojournalists who kept just an excellent documentary of how the story was evolving all the way through Kenneth Starr's testimony on Capitol Hill, which I edited and filed the pictures in real time by myself. Yeah.
I see from the picture that you had the chance to actually meet former President Clinton.
Well,
what did you think? I mean, as you were covering this scandal, having known President Clinton as well.
Working in Washington is like a real-life history lesson. And I just, working in Washington, D.C., I learned how American government works, how the executive branch works, and to be able to be invited, become part of the President Clinton's administration at the end of his term, it was just an honor for me, and to be able to see things from the inside. And I was able to monitor and document the transition from one administration to the George W. Bush administration. So it was just a great history lesson for me as a journalist.
Yeah. It's a part of history that is very unique in the U.S. history, the incident that you covered. And as best as possible, stand in the middle to be able to have a relatively balanced view of what is going on.
Oh, that's minimum.
Yeah.
You have to remain objective the whole time and every time.
Talking about that, when you covered the democracy uprising in Korea, in the country of your birth, that must have been a difficult one to keep, that balanced in the middle process. What was that as a photojournalist covering the democracy uprising in Korea like?
First of all, it was very dangerous. Rocks were flying everywhere. Riot police were shooting tear gas canisters from a shotgun. And it was
And
very
Molotov
dangerous.
cocktails were flying around.
Oh
too.
yeah, very dangerous. So I had to wear protective clothes, comfortable shoes, helmets, just to survive that process. But what was interesting was there were no indiscriminate rioting. People were only protesting for the cause, for democracy. They did not attack any shops, they did not steal, they did not burn down any shops. There were no indiscriminate rioting while there were demonstrations, very violent demonstrations. So that was what was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you take another look back, how do you see the democracy movement that you covered as a photojournalist leading to Korea today?
Well, 36 years later, you can see how only thing people remember about the 1987 democracy movements is the pictures. So photojournalism is history. It's the face of the news, and it's also the face and content of the news. Look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the Korean
true.
students and young men asking for democracy from a dictator. And they won.
Yeah.
And that democracy, the successful democracy in Korea, has paved orderly transition of power for last 7 terms of presidency, and is after United States from 1776, French Revolution, Koreans did it.
Yeah.
They've accomplished democracy in East Asia.
Yeah, it is, I guess, one of the reasons why Korea is considered one of the very few democracies in the world that was gotten by the people.
Sweat and blood of the people.
And tears
Yes.
from the tear gas.
Exactly, exactly.
That you know very well from the people. So it is a very important democracy that we have. And, you know, the end results are different, but so we should really value what we've been able to get.
Monitoring and documenting the process of history is our job as journalists.
What about covering North Korea? I mean, that's a whole different type of government.
The freedom of the press gives us right to cover anything, but we have to earn access. And getting access to North Korea was most difficult. But once I was in there, nobody bothered me what not to photograph. So I had the freedom to photograph anything that was in front of me. And I saw people in countryside, I saw people in the city, I saw how people who speak the language, Korean language, people who eat Korean food, who share the history of Korea, but living in different system. And I try to document them and put a face to the name of North Korea when I went there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, as a Korean by birth, as a native Korean, do you have a different point of view as you cover North Korea?
Well, Korean history is very long, thousands and thousands of years, and we've only been separated for 70 years now. So this is like a dot in long history. So anything could happen in the future, but what will not change is the identity of Korea. Right now, Korea is represented double in the United Nations, and as names of countries, as 2 political systems. So North Korea is actively engaged with Russia and PRC, People's Republic of China. South Korea is actively engaged with the rest of the world, you know, with world's 10th largest economy, trading with just about anybody. South Korea's #1 trading partner is PRC.
Yep.
So when you think about how Korean people are so vibrant and so ingenious and so capable of surviving not only history but of the current political division, I just think it's just fascinating story, and it's a story of our lifetime to be able to document how both Koreas are doing.
Yeah. In South and in the North.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting perspective.
Yeah.
So now, after all these photojournalists' adventures around the world, I hear you are now living in the country of your birth. You're in Korea. What are you doing here, and what occupies your time here?
The whole time while I was working in U.S. media, over 33 years, there were many mistakes that the English media made about Korea because they simply did not know what they did not know about Korea. The knowledge and information about Korea's civilization and culture is so minuscule in English language that I couldn't really blame anybody for not knowing about Korea. But as somebody of Korean heritage and with some knowledge about Korean history and culture, because I've been studying all those years, because it's part of my identity, I wanted to leave as a legacy of my journalism career visual and digital contents about Korean history and culture for the English language audience. So that's why I'm back here documenting Korean history and culture.
And that's your visual history of Korea?
Yes.
So tell us more about the visual history of Korea.
Okay, well, photography is the world's most universal language. It's the language that every culture can understand. So in pictures, I try to show what I can find in Korea. So by showing what is it about Korea that is interesting and different and unique, people in English language or any other language can learn about Korea's ancient nature of its history. And I'm finding stuff that I have never imagined that's possible. For example, I found a newspaper in Korea that was printed in 1577.
1577, yeah.
Commercial newspaper that was printed during the time of Sunjo, King Sunjo the Great.
Yeah.
And newspaper talks about the king has no audience tomorrow. There was an astronomical observation last night, printing on the next day's newspaper, which makes it an evening newspaper. And these are stuff that the people in the English language don't know anything about, but they are present in this Korea.
Yeah. So, I mean, you talked about the fact that, you know, outside of Korea, people don't know what they don't know about
Exactly.
Korea. I mean, you found now an infinite number of those, and you talked about the newspaper, but give us a couple of more examples of what really hit you about what you didn't know.
The Korean ancestors, in some ways, were very ingenious. They had so many innovations, and it's left in the records, like the printing. If you look at that page from the world's first commercial newspaper that was printed.
That is from the commercial newspaper.
Printed with movable types. There are two types. The top sang, which is life, and the bottom sang. One is printed with the wooden block type, and the bottom one is printed with the metal type. So metal has a surface tension. So back then, the ink that was used for wooden type did not work so well on metal type. So surface tension, which is like a droplets of water drops on a piece of metal surface, is shown on the bottom type. So by just looking at the world's first newspaper, you can see how the printing history and culture tradition existed here. You know.
So you can tell the wood sort of absorbs the ink. So you have like a bold type.
Exactly.
And the lighter type of sang, the Chinese character, is because the metal doesn't absorb that ink, and so you have a sort of a more lighter touch.
The Hanja characters that they were using, which was the common language, common written language of East Asia, was so well documented and used in printing that during Joseon period, there were 200 years of Myeongjo font that was developed in Joseon printing. That type of fonts don't exist in Chinese culture or Japanese culture. So only in Korea we have 5 different, in the 200 years of 7 fonts of Myeongjo type. You know, so there were such innovations in this culture. It's just fascinating.
Yeah. And, you know, I have to ask about, because I find it fascinating, your interest in the Korean native dog.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I love dogs.
I love dogs too. So this is why I wanted to ask.
So I was fascinated how companion dogs was the first domesticated animal that the humans, as we evolved, created. And dogs went where people went. So by studying native dogs, you can study the history of the people who have that native dog.
Okay.
And it turns out I was first attracted to the Jindo dog.
Yeah.
Which
is sort of known as the native.
Amazing. From my friends tell me in the U.S., Jindo was the best dog they have ever lived with. Okay. But when I came to Korea, I realized there's Sapsari dogs, and Sapsari, by definition, is long-haired dogs. But within Sapsari genes, it produces short-haired dogs too, and one of them is the Badugi, which is a spotted dog that's in Joseon paintings. Okay, that all comes from Sapsari.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought that was just like a made-up dog or someone.
No. I mean, the painters painted what was around their surroundings.
So like a spotted dog.
Exactly. That's the Sapsari dog with long hair, and then the spotted ones, Badugi, came out of that bloodline, and it turns out Konkuk University professor Park Chang-gyu, he researched the genome sequence of Sapsari dogs and found out that Sapsari has East Asia's oldest genes.
Wow.
That means what? Ancestors who brought Sapsari to this land were the first settlers of East Asia. I mean, if you look at Korea as a map, Korea is the end of the world of East, not only East Asia, but Eurasian continent.
Well, since you seem to know so much and you love the Jindo dogs, tell our viewers a little bit about the characteristics of these uniquely Korean dogs.
First of all, Korean dogs are very attentive, very loyal. They are not only smart, but they are very clean. In fact, they self-potty train, most of them.
Really?
Yeah. If you create a spot in the house, they only go to one spot to go potty. In fact, I slept with one of the Badugi the other night. It didn't bother me for like 14 hours before he wanted to go outside. And then as soon as we go outside, he wants to come back in. I mean, no matter what the size is, they're such good companion dogs. And like I said, most people who have raised Korean dogs, they tell me that it's the best dogs they ever had.
But overall, as you've covered and as you've dealt with Korea and you've talked about Korean heritage that you are now documenting, what bothers you most about the outside view of Korea? What do you feel like your visual history should correct or deal with?
Well, it's the outside ignorance about this vast and ancient culture. All they have to do is look at Korean identity, look at Korean food. There's no staple that is as diverse, as complex, as delicious, perhaps, for some people. And you can pick and choose what you like, but I have American friends who make their own kimchi in their own homes because once they taste it, they get hooked to it. Others who come to Korea just to taste different banchan. When I go to Jeolla province, sometimes you have more than 50 banchan at a meal. Where did that all come from? It comes from ancient history, where they were able to make food without refrigeration for centuries. And now with refrigeration, they can even do more fascinating things with Korean food. So this just absence of knowledge about Korean history and culture outside of Korea is something that I'm trying to at least fix a little bit by adding more digital and visual contents into the English language base and knowledge base.
Do you have an end game to your visual history of Korea? Like, are you going to publish it as a book, or do you have as a journalist, do you have a deadline in which you're going to stop?
Well, I have like weekly column deadlines, but my first volume of visual history book came out. So hopefully, when it does well, the publisher will publish the second and third volumes.
Well, come visit us again when those volumes come out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah.
And that's it for me. I will be back next week with another globalist who is putting Korea on the map. Son Ji-ae, out.